The Arctic hunting ground stretched far and wide under a sky of endless gray. The air was sharp and cold like knives. The snow fell without mercy, and the wind sang in a voice that could freeze the heart of even the strongest warrior. Here the galaxy's most feared hunters gathered every year, called by the alien warlords who ruled the games. It was a place where the weak vanished and the strong left their mark in blood on the ice. There was no warmth here, no safety, no mercy. Massive screens floated above the frozen land, showing every corner of the hunt to the roaring crowds in distant alien cities. Thousands watched from warm halls and rich arenas where they bet fortunes on who would survive. None had ever lasted until the end. The rules were simple: hunt or be hunted, kill or be killed, survive until the final horn, and you would be named champion. But no one had ever heard that horn sound for a living player, not once in the long history of the Arctic hunt. This year, the hunters were larger and more dangerous than ever. Towering reptilian warlords with bone armor and blades like fangs, insectoid assassins with claws sharp enough to cut steel, for armed brutes from worlds where gravity crushed ordinary beings. Their armor gleamed, their weapons hummed with deadly power. They laughed in strange voices as they looked at each other, ready to spill blood on the snow. And among them stood something none of them expected, a lone human named Elias Kane. Elias wore no heavy armor, no shining weapon, no advanced scanning visor, only a thick coat of dark fur, worn gloves, and a simple rifle slung across his back. The alien crowd roared with laughter when the camera focused on him, their voices echoing through the frozen air. Fragile, they said. Slow, they said. Humans were known for trading, farming, building, but not for hunting the galaxy's worst predators. This one will die first, they said. And the warlords in the control towers smiled, as if the human was just an extra joke in their grand game. But Elias did not smile, nor did he frown. His eyes moved slowly over the endless white horizon, watching the drifting snow like it was speaking to him. His breath came out in small clouds, but his steps were calm. The warlord announcer's deep voice boomed through the sky. The hunt begins now. Survive if you can. And with that, the signal was given. The predators split into groups, moving fast across the snow, scanning for heat, motion, and sound, weapons ready to strike down anything they saw. Yet Elias did not rush forward like the others. He turned toward the thickest part of the storm, where the wind screamed and the snow fell so heavy that even the ground was hard to see. The camera drones circled him, trying to understand his strange choice. The alien commentators laughed again, calling it suicide. But Elias kept walking, one slow step after another, his shape becoming harder to see with each passing moment, until he was swallowed completely by the white void. The drones tried to follow, but their signals began to fade, static filling the feed, until even they lost him. The other hunters ignored this, focusing on each other. A reptilian warrior brought down a giant bear-like creature that had been loosed into the arena as prey. The insectoid tracked the heat trail of a brute from another world. Their fights were brutal, quick, and messy. The snow was stained dark in many places. The crowd roared with every strike and kill. But somewhere far away from the noise, Elias Kane was moving deeper into the storm, unseen and unheard. In the control room high above the arena, the alien overseers adjusted their scanners. They could find every hunter on the field, even through snow and ice. But the human signal was strange. It flickered like a candle in the wind, sometimes there, sometimes gone, then gone completely. One overseer tapped the screen, thinking it was broken, but the system was fine. The human had simply vanished from every sensor. Impossible, one of them growled. Nothing hides from our scans. Nothing. Yet the human was gone. Out in the storm, Elias paused for a moment, kneeling in the snow. His gloved hand touched the frozen ground, his eyes half closed. He breathed slowly, feeling the wind shift, listening to its rhythm. The snow covered his shoulders and head like a cloak. His boots left prints for a few steps. Then the prints were gone as the wind filled them in. He kept low, moving in a way that matched the sway of the storm. Every step hidden by the howl of the wind. Every breath hidden by the roar of the blizzard. The predators did not notice him, their attention on each other. The games had only just begun, and already one hunter lay dead. not from Elias, but from another alien's blade. Yet this death brought no fear. They all expected losses early. What they did not expect was the strange shadow that passed far behind them. Vanishing whenever they turned to look, one insectoid hunter paused, sensing something at the edge of their awareness. But there was only snow and more snow. So they moved on, never seeing the faint shape that watched them from a ridge above. In the crowd, the laughter had grown less frequent. Some began to ask where the human had gone. The cameras could not find him. The hunters could not find him. The overseers could not track him. The announcers tried to keep the excitement alive by focusing on the alien battles. But whispers of curiosity spread. Perhaps the human had frozen to death. Perhaps he had hidden in a cave. Perhaps he was already gone. Yet there was no proof. Only the storm, endless and hungry. Far away, Elias moved deeper still, the snow thick enough to hide a world, the wind cutting at his face, the cold biting his fingers. But his steps remained steady. He had walked in worse than this before, in places where only the strong or the clever survived, and Elias Kane had never been the strongest. But he had always been clever. In the distance, the sound of alien weapons echoed faintly, like the heartbeat of a dying giant. But here in the storm, there was only the whisper of snow against his hood and the slow, steady sound of his own breath. Elias knew the hunt had begun, but for him, it would not be a race to kill. It would be a game of patience. The storm was his ally, the cold his shield, and the endless white his weapon. He would not be seen until he chose to be seen. And when that moment came, the hunters would realize too late that the real danger in the Arctic was not the cold, nor the predators, but the quiet man who had become part of the storm itself. The alien predators spread across the frozen land like shadows of death, each moving with the confidence of one who had hunted and killed across 100 worlds. Their armor clinked softly under layers of frost, their weapons hummed in the cold air, and their eyes scanned every ridge and drift for the smallest sign of prey. Some walked alone, trusting in their own skill. Others worked in pairs, their footsteps deep in the snow as they moved quickly toward where the storm looked thinnest. Yet, none of them thought the human was a true threat. To them, he was already gone. The reptilian hunter, named Crass, moved low, his body blending with the jagged ice, his breath slow and controlled, his long tail curling behind him for balance as the scanners swept the white void for heat. They showed moving shapes far ahead, one of them pulsing bright red with warmth, an insectoid target. He licked his sharp teeth and began to close in, unaware that far to his left a faint figure knelt on a ridge. Watching him through a veil of drifting snow, the human's eyes narrowed, the storm masking his scent and sound as he adjusted the strap of his rifle. Another predator, a brute from the high-gravity world of Drez, stomped heavily toward a cluster of rocks half buried in ice, each step sending up clouds of powder, his armor thick, his weapon a massive spike club that could crush bone like glass. His breath fogged in front of him as he scanned the ground for tracks. Finding only wind-smoothed snow, he grunted and moved on, yet behind him, faint and silent, another set of prints appeared and vanished as quickly as they formed, as if the snow itself was alive and erasing its own memory. The insectoid hunter named Zrath skittered across the ice, her forelegs stabbing into the ground with rapid clicks. Her mandibles opened slightly as she tasted the air, smelling the distant trace of blood from a fresh kill made by another hunter. She moved toward it quickly, hoping to scavenge the remains, but she froze suddenly, antennae twitching. Something was wrong. The air shifted in a way she did not like. The storm song seemed to change pitch, and for a moment she thought she saw a shadow where no shadow should be. She clicked her mandibles nervously, scanning with her visor, but saw only white. In the control tower, the overseers leaned over the glowing panels, tracking the hunters as colored signals on the map. Crass moving east, Zrath circling north, the Drez brute heading southwest. All clear, but the human's signal still absent. One overseer growled in frustration. The system cannot lose a target. Another hissed that perhaps the human was using some primitive trick to block detection. Impossible came to reply. Yet, deep inside, they knew something was not right, for never before had they lost sight of a player for so long in the middle of the hunt. The audience was split now. Some laughed still, saying the human was frozen stiff in the snow. Others leaned forward in their seats, curious if perhaps this small, fragile creature was more than it appeared. The betting halls began to hum with new wagers, some daring to place small sums on the human's survival, knowing it was madness, yet drawn to the idea that maybe, just maybe, he would appear again in some unexpected way. Crass closed in on Zrath at last, his blade drawn and humming with cold light. He lunged from the side. Striking fast, Zrath spun with a screech. Her claws flashing, the two predators clashed in the snow, their weapons biting deep into armor. The crowd roared at the sudden duel, but high on the ridge Elias Kane watched without moving, his rifle steady, his eyes not on them but on the wind around them, measuring the flow. Reading the currents of snow as if they were words in a book, he shifted his weight and began to move down the slope, each step perfectly timed with the howl of the blizzard, so that even in their battle the predators would not hear him. The brute from Dres heard the sounds of combat and turned toward them, eager to join and claim a kill. He began to run, his heavy boots smashing into the ice, each impact shaking the ground. But as he crossed a narrow pass between two jagged cliffs, a rope of woven snow cloth snapped up from the ground. Catching his legs, he fell with a crash, his massive body smashing into the drift below. Before he could rise, a shadow moved above him, the shape of a man against the swirling white. The brute swung wildly with his club, hitting only air, and by the time he rolled over, the shadow was gone. Crass and Zrath fought until both staggered back. Panting in the freezing air, they snarled and hissed, ready for another round. But then they heard something else, faint, almost lost in the wind, the sound of slow, crunching footsteps moving around them in a wide circle. Crass turned his head but saw nothing. Zrath's antennae trembled as she scanned the snow. But there was no heat, no movement, only the strange sense of being watched by something that was not there, a feeling that settled into their bones and made their hands tighten on their weapons. In the storm, Elias crouched low behind a broken slab of ice, his gloved hands brushing over the snow, tracing invisible lines. He was not here to kill quickly. Not yet. He was here to learn, to watch how they moved, how they reacted, to see the fear grow in small steps until it bloomed like frost spreading on glass. His face was calm, his breath even, as if he had done this many times before, as if this was not a deadly game, but simply another winter walk. The overseer spoke quickly now, voices sharp, 3 hunters in close range of each other. They said, yet the sensors show something else, an unknown reading moving between them, too faint to lock on. It matches no known weapon or armor signature. One overseer leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Could it be the human? Another shook their head, refusing to believe, yet the thought lingered like a shadow in the back of their minds. The wind rose higher, the snow twisting into ghostly shapes. The hunters tightened their circles, backs nearly touching, weapons raised. The storm thickened around them, hiding the ridges, hiding the sky, hiding everything. Then the sound came again, soft steps in the snow, not rushing, not charging, just moving with calm patience. And when Crass lunged toward the sound, he found only emptiness. When Zrath leapt in the opposite direction, she struck nothing but cold air. And when they both looked back toward the past, the brute from Dres was gone. The crowd erupted in confused noise. The overseers shouted orders to scan the area. The hunters looked at each other in disbelief. And somewhere far away in the storm, Elias Kane moved on, leaving only the wind to tell the story of what had just happened. The storm grew thicker with every passing moment. The hunters now moved slower, their eyes scanning every shadow in the white. The snow fell in heavy waves, coating armor and weapons. The cold bit deeper into joints and fingers, and even the strongest among them felt the weight of the Arctic pressing against their minds. This was no ordinary hunt. The predators had faced dangerous beasts before, but here they felt something they had never felt on any other world, an unseen hand guiding the storm itself, and whispers in the wind that seemed to follow their every move. Crass the reptilian warrior walked with his blade drawn, his long tail dragging behind him through the snow. His breath came out in steady clouds, his visor scanning for any sign of heat. Yet the screen showed nothing ahead, nothing behind, only the endless void of frozen air. He growled low in his throat, the storm muffling the sound until it was swallowed completely. His clawed feet crunched on the surface, each step sinking deep. But then he stopped, for just ahead there was something strange, a half-buried shape in the snow, pale and still, too small to be one of the other hunters. Curiosity made him move closer, and when he reached it, he found a strip of cloth frozen into the ice, dark with what looked like dried blood. He bent to lift it, the cold stinging his fingers even through the armor, but as his hand closed around the fabric, the wind shifted sharply, a gust tearing at his cloak. And in that instant he felt it, the faint vibration of snow being crushed underfoot behind him. He spun, blades slicing the air, yet there was nothing there. The ground showed no prints, only smooth, untouched white. His scales prickled, his eyes narrowed. But before he could move again, something thin and strong looped around his throat from above, tightening with sudden force. His roar was cut short as the rope pulled him upward, high in the jagged ice. Elias Kane braced his boots against a frozen ridge, his gloved hands gripping the cord as he pulled with steady strength. Crass thrashed and clawed, his tail whipping, his feet kicking at the air, but the snow muffled every sound. The rope tightened. His weapon fell into the drift below, his visor cracked under the strain, the glass fogging from his desperate breath. The wind screamed around them like a living thing. And after a long, slow moment, the reptilian hunter hung. Still, his body limp, his eyes frozen open, the rope's knots biting deep into the gaps of his armor. Elias lowered the body into the snow. Working quickly, he stripped the visor and a small heat emitter from the armor, pocketing them under his coat. Then he used the storm to cover the scene, shoving snow into the deep prints, brushing the ice clean until there was no trace of what had happened. The blizzard swallowed every sign, and when Elias moved away, it was as if Crass had never been there at all. Far across the hunting grounds, the insectoid's wrath felt a strange emptiness in the air. She stopped moving, her antennae twitching, sensing the absence of one she had smelled earlier. Crass's scent was gone, erased completely. She clicked her mandibles in confusion, her visor showing no signal from him. Perhaps the cold had frozen his systems. Perhaps he had fallen into a crevasse. Yet, deep in her instincts, she knew something was wrong. She hissed low and turned toward the center of the storm, where the white seemed thicker, where the wind's voice sounded almost like a whisper in a language she could not understand. In the control tower, the overseers frowned. Crass's signal had gone black. No location, no life signs. The announcer's deep voice told the crowd another hunter had fallen. The audience roared, some cheering for the alien who must have done it. But no one claimed the kill. No camera caught the fight. No witness saw the moment. Only a blank space in the record where one of the galaxy's fiercest warriors had been removed from the game. The Dres brute moved with heavy purpose now, his massive club resting on his shoulder, his visor flickering with scans. He muttered in his deep voice about weak hunters who fell too soon. But even he slowed his steps, the cold biting harder now. His thick armor rimed with ice, his breath heavier in the frigid air. He thought of Crass, wondering if the reptilian had been careless. Then he thought of the human, the one who had walked into the storm and vanished. The thought made him grin at first, but the grin faded as he realized Crass's death had no sound, no sign, no trace, like prey taken by a ghost. Elias crouched behind a jagged wall of ice, watching the brute through the drifting snow. The visor taken from Crass now strapped over his own eyes, its heat reading faint but functional. The brute's glowing red outline stood out against the cold blue of the Arctic. Elias's breath came slow, his hand steady on the grip of his rifle. But he did not fire. Not yet. Patience was his greatest weapon. He studied the brute's stride, the way the snow shifted under his weight, the timing of his turns. Every detail stored in his mind like pieces of a puzzle, the storm giving him time to think, to choose the moment. Zrath moved closer to the area where Crass had vanished, her legs stabbing deep into the snow with each step, her claws ready, her senses straining. The storm pressed in around her, hiding everything beyond a few meters. Shapes flickered in the edge of her vision. vanishing when she looked at them directly. The wind carried faint crunches that might have been footsteps or might have been the settling of snow. She clicked her mandibles again, unease curling in her chest, the kind of unease that made even a predator think about retreat. The brute finally stopped to check his bearings, pulling a small scanner from his belt. He tapped at its surface, muttering curses when it flickered with static. Then he felt it, the same strange shift in the air that Crass had felt, the sensation of being in the path of something unseen. His eyes darted to the ridges, the snow, the empty white around him. His grip tightened on the club, his breath loud in his ears. And then from far off came a sharp sound, a crack like ice splitting. He turned toward it instantly, weapon raised, but behind him the snow moved, a shadow rose, and the storm swallowed his roar. The crowd erupted again as another signal went black. The overseers barked orders to search the feeds. The hunters still alive grew more tense, and Elias Kane moved through the white, leaving only the blizzard to speak of what had just happened. The first human kill was complete, and it would not be the last. The storm thickened until even the strongest scanners began to fail. The alien hunters moved through a world of endless white where the horizon vanished into the sky and the ground swallowed their steps. The snow fell in heavy sheets that clung to armor and weapons. The wind roared like a living beast, its voice rising and falling in a strange rhythm that made the heart beat faster. Some hunters muttered curses into their calms, but their words were drowned in static. Others kept silent, eyes shifting to every shadow in the snow, as if expecting it to strike. Zrath the insectoid moved with sharp, jerking motions, her claws clicking against the frozen surface, her antennae twisting in all directions as she searched for signs of life. Yet she found only the sound of her own breathing inside the visor. The others were gone, their signals black, their scents erased, their trails swallowed by the storm. She thought of Crass and the brute, strong hunters both, now nothing but names on the list of the fallen. Her legs moved faster, the instinct to hunt now, mixed with the instinct to survive. Far away, two other hunters, a thin-scaled sniper from the desert moon of Valrak and a wolf-like warrior from the jungles of the Run, kept close together, the white void pressing in around them. They spoke in short bursts over private comms, swearing they would not be caught alone. Their eyes scanned every drift, every rise in the snow. The sniper adjusted the long barrel of his rifle, its scope coated in a thin layer of frost. The wolf warrior sniffed the air, catching only the frozen scent of ice and wind. Both of them felt the same thing, the sense of being followed, the feeling that every step forward was matched by another unseen step somewhere, just behind. In the control tower, the overseers argued. The feed showed less and less of the hunt. Cameras blinded by snow, sensors clogged with false readings, unknown interference blocking their scans. One overseer hissed that the storm was too strong this cycle. Another insisted that something else was moving inside it, something controlling the winds. The announcer tried to keep the crowd excited, speaking of skill and courage, but his voice carried an edge of unease that even the audience began to notice. Elias Kane moved like a shadow carved from the snow itself, his steps in perfect rhythm with the gusts, his coat now almost the same color as the ice, the visor taken from Crass, giving him ghostly images of heat through the haze. He saw Zrath far to the left, the sniper and wolf warrior ahead, all of them tense and ready. But fear was creeping in, and fear was a weapon he knew well. It slowed the hands, narrowed the vision, made even the strongest mind doubt itself. He would use it like a blade. Before striking for real, the sniper stopped suddenly, raising his rifle toward a distant ridge where a shape flickered in the storm, a tall, narrow shadow standing still against the wind. He focused the scope, but the glass showed only white. He blinked, adjusted, and for an instant the shadow was there again, closer this time, before vanishing into the snow. The wolf warrior growled, his ears twitching. He moved to the side, sniffing again, his claws flexing. But there was no scent, only the shifting smell of the blizzard, as if the storm itself had learned to hide. Zrath felt the same sensation, the feeling of being watched from many angles at once. Her legs dug into the snow as she spun, scanning all directions, her claws tapping in a nervous rhythm. She thought she heard footsteps matching her own, but when she stopped, the sound stopped too. She clicked her mandibles in frustration, lifting her weapon high, but the storm gave her nothing, no target, no enemy, only the same empty white. In the tower, the overseers tried a wide sweep scan, sending pulses across the entire field. The data returned in broken fragments, but one reading caught their attention, faint movement patterns weaving between the hunters, never closer than a few meters, never far enough to be out of reach, always circling. The pattern looked almost like the path of a predator, herding its prey toward a single point. One overseer stared at the image, the shape of the path slowly twisting into something familiar. The outline of the human's earlier movements before he vanished from sensors entirely. The wolf warrior's ears twitched again, his head snapping toward the left. He saw a flicker in the corner of his vision, something dark against the snow. Moving fast, he roared and charged. The sniper cursed and followed, both of them racing into the blinding white. But the shape ahead never seemed to get closer. It shifted left, then right, always just out of reach, leading them into a narrow valley of jagged ice. The wind howled between the cliffs, the snow falling thicker until they could barely see each other. Then the shape was gone. Elias was already above them, crouched on a ridge of ice, his breath slow, his eyes tracking their positions. The wolf warrior looked up first, but only for a moment. An arrow of sharpened ice slammed into the snow beside him. The sound sharp and sudden. He spun toward it, thinking it was a missed attack, but in that instant Elias had vanished again, his path blending into the wind. The sniper shouted into the comms, but the words broke into static. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his rifle. The valley walls felt closer now, the air thicker, every sound amplified by the narrow space. He heard his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He turned once more toward the ridge, but all he saw was white, endless, and empty. Zrath moved faster now, the unease inside her turning into urgency. She could not see the others, but she could feel the drop in their signals, their movements less steady, their positions shifting too quickly. She knew the hunt had changed. It was no longer a contest of skill, but a struggle against something they could not see, something that had already claimed two of the strongest and was now stalking the rest with silent precision. The crowd began to shift in their seats, their voices less certain, their cheers quieter. The announcer spoke of bravery, but his words sounded hollow against the growing silence of the arena. The storm on the screens looked more alive than the hunters themselves, its swirling shapes sometimes forming figures that seemed almost human before breaking apart again. Above the narrow valley, Elias waited, his mind calm, his body steady. He had no need to rush. Fear was already doing the work for him. The next move would come when the time was right, and until then he was content to let the blizzard whisper in the ears of his prey. The Arctic storm did not rest. The wind screamed across the frozen ground in long, deep voices. The snow swirled in tight circles around the jagged ice, and every shadow seemed to move when the hunters were not looking. The alien warriors who once strode with confidence now moved in short, sharp bursts, their heads snapping from side to side, their weapons held high, their steps cautious, as if the snow itself could rise up and take them. Each of them knew that 2 kills had been claimed without a sound, without a fight, without even a witness, and the thought pressed against their minds like ice against skin. Zrath moved along a ridge, her claws digging into the frozen surface, her eyes scanning the storm below. She spotted the wolf warrior and the sniper moving fast through a narrow pass, their bodies tense, their weapons ready. She sent a short signal to join them, but the comm returned only a hiss of static. She clicked her mandibles in frustration, her antennae catching faint tremors in the snow that did not match the rhythm of the wind. She slowed her pace, feeling the air grow heavier, as if something was waiting in the whiteness just ahead. The wolf warrior's fur bristled under his armor, his ears catching every sound, his claws tapping against his weapon's grip, his breathing heavier now. He growled low at the sniper to keep his aim steady, but his own eyes kept darting toward the walls of ice. Shapes seemed to flicker at the edges of his sight. Here a dark line that vanished when he turned, there a moving shadow that broke apart into snow. He knew something was near, too near. and his instincts screamed for him to strike first. Before it struck him, the sniper's hands shook slightly as he adjusted the scope, his mind replaying the moment when the shadow led them into the valley, the way it moved just fast enough to stay ahead, the way it vanished without a trace. He muttered that it was impossible. No prey could move like that in a storm. No prey could hide from every scan. No prey could kill without leaving a single drop of blood behind. Yet it had happened twice already, and the next could be him. The thought made his finger tighten near the trigger. Far above them, on a high ridge, Elias Kane lay still, the snow covering his body until he was little more than a shape in the white, his breath slow, his visor glowing faintly under the frost. He watched the two hunters below, saw the tension in their steps, the way their heads turned too often, the way their formation broke and reformed in uneven patterns. Fear was bending them, making them predictable. He knew that soon they would break completely, and when they did, the storm would give him the opening he needed. Wrath dropped from the ridge and landed in the pass ahead of the two hunters, her claws digging deep into the snow. The wolf warrior snarled at her sudden arrival, his weapon rising. She clicked her mandibles in warning, telling them she had felt movement nearby. The sniper hissed that they had seen it too, shapes in the white, always gone before they could shoot. Zrath's eyes narrowed, her voice low. She said it was not the storm. It was something else, something using the storm, the wolf warrior's grip tightened, his ears twitching toward the sound of wind curling between the ice walls. In the control tower, the overseers leaned closer to their screens, watching the three signals draw close. One overseer whispered that they were almost in the same spot where the brute had vanished. Another hissed that they should avoid it. But the hunters did not hear, their voices lost in the static of the storm. The audience shifted in their seats, the air in the viewing halls thick with anticipation, many now whispering the same thing. The human, the human, the human. Elias moved low along the ridge above them, his hands brushing the ice, his boots silent under the snow. He listened to their voices, the sharp edge of fear in each word. He could almost feel their eyes searching for him. But their vision was too slow for the storm, too slow for him. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold fill his chest. Then he slid down the slope in silence, his path hidden by the wind, his shadow flickering like a ghost through the flurries. The wolf warrior caught the movement first, his eyes widening. He shouted and swung his weapon toward the ridge. The sniper spun, aiming high, but they fired in an empty snow. The shape was gone. The wind tore at their armor, stinging their faces with ice. The sound of footsteps seemed to circle them. Left, right, behind. The wolf warrior turned too fast, his claws scraping the ice. His eyes met the sniper's for only a second, and in that second doubt filled the space between them, each thinking the other might be the one to betray, first if it meant survival. The sniper's rifle twitched upward. The wolf warrior's claws tightened, their bodies tensed, and then Elias struck, dropping from the ridge like a piece of the storm itself, his shoulders slamming into the sniper, sending him crashing into the snow, the rifle skidding out of reach. The wolf warrior roared and lunged, but Elias rolled under the strike, his hand snapping a thin cord around the warrior's legs. The momentum carried the predator forward into the drift, where the snow swallowed his face and the cold bit deep into his lungs. By the time he tore the cord free, Elias was gone again, his path erased by the wind. The sniper scrambled to his feet, his hands empty, his visor cracked from the fall. He turned in every direction but saw only white. The wolf warrior rose beside him, his breath ragged, his claws stained with frost. They shouted each other's names, but the sound was small against the roar of the storm. Zrath's voice came faintly through the static, ordering them to move toward her. Yet the way was not clear, the snow closing every path. Elias watched from a new ridge, his body low, his breath steady. The two hunters were now slower, more desperate, their formations gone, their trust broken. He could see in the way they moved, no longer watching the storm but watching each other, each wondering if the other's fear would become a weapon turned against them. The storm would do the rest, and when they finally looked away from the white to face each other, he would strike again. The storm screamed across the open ice as if the sky itself had torn open. Waves of snow rolled through the air like ghosts, twisting and spinning, hiding every shape and shadow. The alien hunters were scattered now, their voices faint through the static, their signals blinking on the screens in the control tower. Overseers hissed to each other that the human was no longer just prey. The human had become the hunt itself. And in the center of the frozen hell, the leader of the predators moved. With slow, heavy steps, his armor etched with scars from battles across countless worlds, his weapon like a piece of a dead star in his hands, his breath leaving bursts of steam that vanished into the storm. Elias Kane was close enough to see the faint glow of the leader's visor through the snow, close enough to feel the weight of his presence even through the roar of the wind. The others were broken now, one limping through the drifts, another lost beyond the ridges, one silent and still on the ice. The leader alone remained with full strength, and Elias knew this fight would not end with tricks or shadows. This would be face to face, step for step. One would not walk away. The leader paused at the edge of a frozen rise, scanning the ground below, his vision cutting through the storm with alien precision. He saw movement far to the left and swung his weapon, but the shape vanished into the white. His jaw clenched, his claws flexed. His mind replayed the moment his warriors had fallen, the silent strikes, the way the snow swallowed every sound. He had hunted in the burning deserts of Kryth and in the black jungles of Urvek. He had fought creatures that could melt, steel with a breath, but never had he faced prey that made the air itself turn against him. Elias crouched low in the snow, his eyes on the leader's stance, his muscles steady despite the cold pressing deep into his bones. He adjusted the grip on his blade, feeling the weight settle in his hand. Every step in the storm had been leading to this. Every flicker of movement, every false trail, every whisper of sound, all to bring the leader alone into the open where the wind would be as much his enemy as Elias. He slowed his breathing, counting the rhythm of the gusts, waiting for the moment when the storm would rise high enough to hide his charge. Far above them, the control tower audience leaned forward, some gripping the edges of their seats, others whispering predictions, some saying the leader would crush the human in seconds, others saying the human had already won by lasting this long. The overseers exchanged quiet words about ending the hunt before the spectacle turned against the predators. But the leader had silenced them with a single command before he entered the blizzard. No interference, no retreat. The hunt would end in the storm. The wind rose, a sharp wall of white sweeping between the ridges. The leader turned slightly, his weapon lowering for a fraction of a second, and Elias moved, bursting from the drift like part of the storm breaking free, his boots striking the ice without a sound, his blade flashing once in the pale light before the leader's weapon swung up to meet it. Steel and alien alloy clashed with a sound that cut through the wind like thunder. The shock pushed both back, snow exploding around them, the storm twisting tighter as if drawn to the fight. The leader struck first, his weapon slicing through the air with the force of a falling mountain. Elias slipped aside, the edge missing by a breath. His counterstrike was fast, a line across the leader's armor that sparked but did not break. The leader roared, the sound deep and raw, and drove forward, each step shaking the ice under them. Elias gave ground but kept his balance, letting the wind push against the leader's swings, each gust stealing a fraction of his strength, each flurry blinding him for a heartbeat. They moved across the ice like shadows locked in a circle, blades and claws flashing, boots and talons crunching in the snow, the storm wrapping around them in tight coils. The leader caught Elias's shoulder once, the armor bending under the blow, pain stabbing through him. But he twisted free, driving his knee into the alien's side, the impact forcing a grunt from the predator's chest. They broke apart for a moment, breathing heavy, eyes locked through the swirling white, each knowing the next exchange would decide who walked away. The leader lunged faster than his size should allow, his weapon a streak of dark light in the snow. Elias dropped low, sliding under the swing, his blade rising in an arc that struck just below the alien's chest plate. The edge bit through the joint with a sharp crack. The leader staggered, one knee dipping into the ice, but he swung back with brutal force, catching Elias across the ribs, the blow lifting him off his feet and into a drift, the snow swallowing him whole. the leader straightened, breathing like a forge, scanning for the human. Silence for a breath, then another. The leader stepped closer to the drift, his visor scanning the surface. The snow shifted once, then nothing. He leaned in, his weapon raised for the final strike, and the storm roared again, a sudden wall of wind and ice blinding him. Elias rose from the side, not the front, his blade driving up under the leader's arm. The strike deep and final, the alien's roar shaking the ice. His weapon falling from his grasp, steam rising from the wound as he dropped to one knee, his visor flickering. Elias stepped back, his chest heaving. The leader's gaze locked on him even as the light faded. The predator's voice came low and strange through the storm, a word that might have been respect, or might have been a curse. Then the great body sank into the snow, the wind covering it as if it had never been there, the storm taking the sound away until there was only the endless white. Elias stood alone in the blizzard, the cold biting deep, the hunt over but the storm still alive around him. The control tower's signals blinking that the leader's marker had gone dark, the overseers silent, the audience holding their breath, and in that moment the human turned and walked into the wind, his shadow fading once more into the snow. The storm began to fade as the first pale light of a weak sun bled across the horizon. The wind slowed, the snow settled into still layers, and the endless white seemed to stretch forever without movement. In the distance, the towers of the hunting complex rose from the ice like black teeth, silent now, their antennae swaying gently in the cold breeze. Within the control chamber, the alien overseers stood frozen in disbelief, their screens flashing the final readings, the leader's signal gone. The humans' faint bio readings moving away from the hunt zone, steady and unbroken. Whispers moved through the room like cracks in glass, some in awe, others in fear, for no prey had ever walked out alive when the leader had entered the field. Elias Kane's steps were slow but certain. His body carried wounds that burned with each breath. His ribs ached where the blow had landed. His shoulder throbbed where the armor had bent under the leader's strike. Yet he moved without hesitation across the open ice, leaving a trail of deep prints that the wind began to erase almost as soon as they formed. He did not look back toward the place where the leader had fallen. He did not look toward the distant forms of the alien hunters who still lay scattered in the snow. He only looked forward toward the shadow of the tower that waited ahead. High above the arena floor, a crowd of alien dignitaries shifted in their seats, their cold eyes following the human as if trying to understand the thing that had unfolded before them. They had come to watch a display of superiority, a demonstration of their greatest hunters in their deadliest environment. Instead, they had witnessed the slow dismantling of a hunting party by one figure who moved like the storm itself. Now they could not decide whether to applaud or to fear, their voices low and tense, their translators murmuring words in many tongues, all circling the same thought. If one human could do this, what would many humans be capable of? The gates to the arena floor opened with a deep metallic groan, the sound echoing through the frozen air. Elias walked through without breaking stride. Two armored guards stood at either side, their weapons low but their eyes sharp. They followed his movements closely as if unsure whether to bow or to strike. Beyond the gates, a narrow path of steel led up into the shadowed halls of the tower, the walls slick with frost, the lights dim and flickering from the storm's interference. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the complex where the overseers waited. Inside the main chamber, the leader's seat stood empty, a heavy presence missing from the circle of authority. The overseers looked at one another, then at Elias as he entered, his boots leaving wet marks on the floor, his breath a slow mist in the cold air. One of the senior overseers stepped forward, his crest lowered in an unfamiliar gesture that might have been respect, his voice quiet as he asked how the human had done it. But Elias said nothing, his eyes scanning the faces before him, reading them like a battlefield, knowing that words would be twisted and weighed until they lost all meaning. Silence became his answer. Reports of the hunt spread quickly through the alien networks. Footage leaked despite the overseer's attempt to contain it. Images of a lone human moving through the blizzard, alien hunters falling one by one. The final duel against the leader ending with the predator sinking into the snow. These images raced through colonies and fleets, stirring conversations in mess halls, in barracks and council chambers. Some spoke of honor, some of shame, some of the danger of underestimating prey that could think and adapt faster than the hunt itself. In places where humans had never been seen, their name was now spoken with a new weight. In the lower barracks, alien warriors sat in uneasy silence, their claws tapping on metal tables, the younger among them asking if the human had some hidden weapon, the veterans shaking their heads, saying it was not weapons that won the hunt, but something colder and sharper inside the human's mind, something that turned the hunt into a mirror that reflected fear back at the predators. Some wondered aloud whether they would be sent again into the ice to prove themselves. Others quietly hoped the hunts would change forever. Elias was given a chamber high in the tower to rest, the walls lined with unfamiliar trophies from other worlds, the floor covered with fur from creatures he had never seen. Food was brought though he ate little. Water was placed though he drank only enough to keep his voice steady if he ever chose to speak. The overseers expected questions or demands. Instead, he sat in the corner by the narrow window that looked out over the endless white, watching the wind move across the ice, knowing that the storm would always return, and with it the memory of what had happened. On the third day, a message arrived from the highest council of the alien dominion, its seal heavy and unbroken. The overseers read it in silence, their eyes flicking toward the human more than once. The message ordered that the Arctic hunt be suspended indefinitely, citing the loss of the leader and the breach in the intended balance of spectacle. It also carried a line that none of them read aloud, but all understood. The human was to be released, not as an act of mercy, but as a calculation. Better to let the story spread as a warning than to keep him as a prisoner and invite attempts to claim him. When the gates opened again to the frozen plain, Elias stepped out without a word. The wind cold but softer now, the path ahead unmarked. No escort followed. No hunters waited. The overseers watched from the high windows as his figure moved away, shrinking with each step until the white took him again. Some believed they would never see him return. Others whispered that he might appear one day on another world, in another storm. When the hunt came for him again, far away in the human colonies, whispers began to reach the outer posts. A story of one of their own who had walked into the blizzard against alien predators and walked out again. The details shifting with each telling. Some said he had vanished into the storm and never been seen. Others claimed he had taken the leader's weapon as a trophy. Some said he had made a pact with the storm itself. In the quiet corners of ships and stations, the story became a kind of quiet fire, burning in the minds of those who might one day be hunted themselves. And so the Arctic lay silent again, the ice waiting, the wind whispering over the ridges, the storm gathering far beyond the horizon where no eyes could see. Somewhere out there a lone figure moved across the frozen world, leaving no trail, his breath steady, his eyes fixed on some place only he knew. The hunt was over, but the legend had only just begun.